You and I both know how these rainy Thursday nights go in crowded upscale bars. A 28-year-old single dad had just one goal: drain his glass and get home to his 6-year-old girl. He sought no trouble, wanted zero small talk, and absolutely wasn't looking to meet anybody new. But right across that room, a woman sat completely frozen in a silent panic that only a truly observant eye would ever catch. Ryan Carter saw it. He stepped right up, played his part, and secured her safe exit. They parted ways right after, two complete strangers vanishing into the rainy city night. Neither of them ever expected to cross paths again. But if you believe a selfless act always leaves its mark at the perfect time, stick with me until the very end. Ryan Carter hadn't always looked quite so exhausted. Not too long ago, his weariness was just the normal kind you'd expect from everyday life. The simple kind a solid night of sleep could easily cure. The sort that washed away after a lazy weekend and 2 cups of coffee. But 3 heavy years had passed since the tragic crash that claimed his wife. And the exhaustion Ryan dragged around now was the kind that buried itself deep, sinking into his bones, his daily routines, and the heavy silences of things he left unsaid. 28 years old, solidly built, with calloused hands that mapped out a life of hard labor. He navigated the world with a certain quietness that folks regularly confused with simple shyness. It was never shyness. It was the calculated stillness of a guy who had learned to watch before opening his mouth, to fully read a room before he ever stepped inside, and to catch what everyone else missed while they were too busy trying to stand out. His little girl, Grace, was 6 and the sole reason Ryan Carter managed to get out of bed each morning. She inherited her mother's dark, expressive eyes and her dad's famously stubborn streak. And she'd randomly ask the kind of deep questions at breakfast that grown adults usually wouldn't even think to ponder until their twilight years. Ryan loved her with a fierce loyalty he rarely verbalized, mostly because words alone, in his own experience, always fell short when it came to the things that truly mattered. He'd raised her solo since she turned 3, grinding it out as an electrical systems technician, snagging local jobs that ranged from rewiring aging residential buildings to fixing massive commercial systems all over town. It was honest, paid the bills, but stayed incredibly unstable, the type of freelance gig that hit in unpredictable waves. Flush one month, totally dry the next, and with a kid who desperately needed solid ground more than anything. Ryan had quietly started hunting for a much better career. Their home city possessed that unique, chaotic energy typical of massive American concrete jungles. The overwhelming sense that 10,000 separate lives were playing out simultaneously in just a few blocks, almost all of them completely invisible to one another. You know the type of place where a guy could walk 20 blocks and never lock eyes with a single soul, where a random pub gets deafeningly packed on a Wednesday night just because the work week already felt brutally long. Ryan had actually grown up in smaller towns, but the urban chaos suited him, precisely because it favors those who quietly observe rather than loudly perform. There was always something interesting to watch, always a hidden story living right in that gap between spoken words and what their body language truly screamed. He built this sharp intuition without any kind of professional training, but purely from long years of necessity. For a single dad, protecting his kid meant spotting trouble early. Sometimes that awareness sets up perfectly timed grace. Evelyn Harper also knew how to read people in a heartbeat, though her survival skills came from a completely different battlefield. By 27, she was already the CEO of a logistics tech startup scaling faster than most industry analysts ever saw coming. She spent 4 grueling years building that tech company, starting from nothing but a laptop, a concept, and a borrowed room. And she willed it into something incredibly real. A true business with offices, payroll, and coastal venture capitalists flying out just to meet her. From the outside, she embodied exactly what the business magazines called her: perfectly composed, precise and unflinching under pressure. She carried her authority naturally, like a founder who had fought twice as hard for it. Most folks meeting her in a professional setting always walked away feeling just a little bit less confident than they were when they walked in. You and I know, though, that a pristine exterior usually hides a struggle waiting for unexpected grace. The board of directors controlling her company had, over the last few months, grown extremely loud about her needing to cozy up and charm certain key investors. A boardroom code meaning far more than just standard contracts and quarterly earnings calls. She caught their toxic drift perfectly. She'd been dodging these exact kinds of shady implications since her early junior employee days. So she perfected the art of faking absolute polite compliance. Smiling on cue, smoothly deflecting without ever making it obvious. Keeping up the illusion of cooperation while fiercely guarding a personal boundary she swore she'd never let anyone cross. The constant act was draining. Those long evenings playing the game always left her feeling completely and utterly hollow inside. Victor Harlan was the latest wealthy backer the board demanded she win over tonight. A guy pushing his late 50s. Rich in that untouchable way certain men in big cities always seem to be. Oozing the smug confidence of a guy who never hears the word no from anyone beneath him. The cocktail lounge was one of those spots trying desperately. Hard to look casual, warm amber lighting masking a strictly calculated, meticulous design. Background music engineered for spontaneity. Mixologists trained to pour every single drink like a masterpiece of personal art. This rainy Thursday drew the standard crowd of tired finance guys and off-the-clock professionals. The exact kind of crowd that creates a steady, insulating blur of chatter, keeping any one person's voice safely hidden away. Ryan was only there because a neighboring client begged him to fix a blown circuit breaker down in the gloomy basement service area. Naturally, the repair dragged on far longer than expected. By the time he finally finished up, the storm outside was absolutely pouring. He grabbed a corner stool, ordering a drink without realizing he was positioned perfectly to help. Just waiting out the worst of the weather, completely unaware of what was coming. Watch how these moments happen. He wasn't even scanning the room when she caught his eye. It was simply the rigid way she moved in the beat. Exact way someone moves when they silently need the kind of selfless rescue that asks for nothing back. You and I know how it starts, Ryan saw it instantly. She sat stuck at a corner table. Her older date carried himself with the authority of a guy used to dominating every single room he ever walked into. The woman looked striking, but in a very guarded, deliberate way. Professional attire, perfectly stiff posture. Her face was carefully arranged to fake being calm during this bad date. But Ryan was actually paying attention. He watched how her forced smile completely failed to reach her eyes. How she angled her body away from the guy across the table, even while pretending to lean right into him. How her fingers gripped her drink, not to take a sip but just to have a lifeline to hold on to. Victor Harlan reached right across the table and grabbed her hand. The move was definitely intentional. She didn't pull away. Instead, she quietly shifted her drink. She used a small, practiced motion to slip her hand away from his, dodging the trap without offering a flat rejection. Ryan watched her pull this escape tactic 3 times in 10 minutes. Each time, Victor reacted with a creepy patience that felt exactly like heavy pressure. The confidence of a guy who felt the night's outcome was already completely decided, and he just waited for her to figure that reality out. Ryan heard little pieces of their chat over the crowd. Something about a business funding round. Something gross about why personal trust matters in business connections. He used sneaky, careful words that left her no clear way to call him out, but still made his intentions perfectly and painfully clear. He sat and processed the awkward situation for a minute. He tried telling himself it was not his business. He thought maybe he missed the context of this uncomfortable setup, that he did not know the whole story, that grown adults in a crowded public bar could totally handle their own messy problems. He ordered another drink he didn't even want and just stared at his phone screen. Grace's babysitter sent a quick photo at 8:30. His daughter fast asleep in the living room chair. Her hand resting under her cheek, bathed in the warm light of a tiny lamp in a completely dark room. This is where the kindness sparks. Ryan studied that photo, then placed his phone face down. He pictured exactly what he would want a total stranger to do if his daughter was ever trapped across a room like that. Not today, not as a sweet 6-year-old, but years ahead, as a woman navigating a tough world that sadly had not changed enough to keep her safe. He realized what it truly meant to witness this silent plea for help and ignore it. To just drain his glass, step into the rain, and let that selfish inaction haunt him for years. Ryan was never the type of single dad who played the loud hero for an audience. But true kindness plants a seed, and he simply could not stay in his seat tonight. He paid his tab, tossed cash on the counter, and headed straight across the bar. He strolled over without rushing, projecting absolutely zero aggressive energy. You and I know that steady walk, moving like he belonged right there, simply arriving. He reached their table and gently rested his hand on the back of her chair, never touching her directly. Just the chair. Knowing this good deed was right, he smiled warmly at her and simply said, "I've been looking for you." Ordinary words, but you and I know the timing was perfect. For a half second she looked up at him, her expression completely raw and utterly grateful. Totally unguarded, unlike anything she had shown before. Not once during the whole hour this single father had watched her from afar. Victor Harlan glared up, wearing the exact look of a man furious that his bad date was being derailed by someone entirely out of line. He demanded, his tone carefully engineered to project heavy authority without shouting. Just who Ryan was. Ryan held the older man's stare with a calm steadiness, neither aggressive nor remotely sorry. He simply stated that he was an old friend, claiming that he and Evelyn had been trying to catch up all week, adding a polite apology for the interruption, but insisting they had somewhere important to be. A tense, suspended moment hung in the air as Victor sized Ryan up, the way his kind always judged men like Ryan, silently cataloging his clothes and his quiet posture. In that exact breathless pause, Evelyn Harper made her choice. She met Ryan's eyes and finally spoke. I completely lost track of time. Her delivery was so flawless that even Ryan almost bought the sudden rescue narrative himself. She excused herself with the smooth grace of someone who had practiced it. Ryan guided her toward the exit at a slow, comfortable pace, looking exactly like two old friends who had known each other forever. Neither uttered a single word until they finally pushed through the doors and into the rain. The air outside felt cold, fresh, and deeply clean in that rare way city streets only manage during a massive, genuine downpour. They paused together beneath the narrow awning over the entrance. For a brief minute, silence fell between them, but not from awkwardness. Let's be honest, we all know that pure relief when the act drops and you can breathe. Evelyn Harper pulled in one slow breath and then another. Because true kindness expects nothing, Ryan simply stood with his hands pocketed, watching the wet street and giving her a safe, quiet space to finally collect herself. Thank you, she finally whispered. Her voice shifted out here, much lower, much quieter. Her polished shield was still there, but carrying something deeply genuine right underneath. You didn't have to do that. Ryan gave a tiny shrug and softly replied, Thought you might need it. She gazed at him then, really looking, matching that exact same gentle, attentive stillness he had used while observing her from across the noisy room. He met her gaze without looking away. Neither broke eye contact for a heavy moment that lingered far longer than simple politeness demanded. She asked if he made a habit of rescuing stranded strangers. He weighed the question honestly before admitting that no, he really hadn't. She told him he was a natural, that she practically bought the excuse herself. He praised fast reflexes, noting that if she hadn't caught his drift with such perfect timing, the entire charade would have crashed and burned in 10 seconds flat. Something soft shifted in her face then, not fully a smile but the warm ghost of one. The kind of expression that slips out when someone suddenly forgets to build a wall. The storm surged for a second, then relaxed back into a steady, calming rhythm. Ryan casually glanced at his watch. An unconscious habit he missed until she noticed, but we both know this quiet kindness left its mark. You and I know true kindness expects nothing. He claimed he was just checking his daughter. He dropped the word daughter with absolute ease. To him, being a father was just the most natural, unspoken reality in the world. Evelyn heard that warmth, and something deep inside her took note. Not in some overly sentimental way. Rather, it was like catching a quiet detail that instantly reshaped everything that just happened. This total stranger had crossed a packed room just to pull her from a miserable situation. He expected zero reward. He didn't know her, he gained nothing, and she hadn't even asked. He stepped up purely because he saw a bad scene and knew it wasn't right. No names were traded. No phone numbers were ever swapped. It definitely was not an unfriendly chat. Actually, in its own very quiet way. It was the realest conversation either of them had shared with a stranger in years. But they respected a natural boundary, knowing this act of grace was already perfectly complete. Trying to drag the encounter out into something more would only ruin the pure, selfless nature of the moment that neither of them wanted. Evelyn promised she would be completely fine from here, and she honestly meant it. Ryan heard the truth in her voice and just nodded. She thanked him once more, but this second time hit differently. It was deeply personal, carrying a heavy sincerity that her first polite reaction completely lacked. They parted ways into the night, Ryan pulling his collar up against the cold rain. Long after he vanished, Evelyn lingered alone beneath the safety of the awning, watching the empty street without really seeing. We all know that quiet mark a selfless deed always leaves right behind. Pure kindness never asks for a reward, yet it leaves a lasting mark. By the time Ryan finally made it home, the evening rain drummed a soft, steady rhythm against his windows. That gentle downpour miraculously made his tiny apartment feel snug, safe, and completely warm. He quietly paid the teenage babysitter, a college kid from upstairs who gave his little girl exactly the right kind of playful energy and deep patience a 6-year-old truly needs. Then he just lingered in the living room doorway, quietly watching his young daughter sleep. Let's look at this scene together. She was fast asleep in the big armchair, one little shoe somehow missing. A tiny reading lamp bathed her quiet, peaceful face in a warm amber glow. Ryan lingered there much longer than he really needed to. He crossed the room. He slipped off her shoe with the quiet grace of a man who naturally cares for others without hesitation. Without waking her at all, he tucked a soft blanket gently around her small shoulders. Letting her sleep peacefully right there, he went and brewed some dark coffee. Way too late for caffeine, but he sat at the table, staring down a massive folder packed with 2 straight weeks of deep company research. Thick stacks of printed job notes. A single-page resume summarizing 8 long years of honest, relentless effort. Real-world experience, but absolutely zero college degree. Call it cosmic timing, but a friend's agency sent him this perfect job opening. A senior systems operations coordinator role at a highly successful. Now watch this, a tech firm expanding its physical footprint rapidly across 3 entire states. He read that listing 4 careful times before finally applying. He weighed what the moment needed against his own skills. Turns out, he was far more prepared to help than he expected. You and I know kindness ripples. They called within 48 hours. The place was called Harper Logistics. He researched the logistics firm obsessively. He knew preparing for this job hunt was the only variable he actually controlled. He studied every public detail about their growth and operations, and exactly how they planned to fix broken shipping infrastructure. He scoured the firm's history, press releases, a business profile, and a short chat with the founder. Most articles just called her by her job title, rarely using a full name in any of the pieces. The only photo he found of her was tiny and completely blurred out. So Ryan built a vague mental picture of this CEO, just a collection of impressive words rather than a human face. He hadn't thought at all about the bar, leaving his notes right by the door. He hadn't thought about the woman either. Let's be honest, we all box away our good deeds. To him, that night was important, but he never expected a reward. It was sealed off. His job search had to keep moving. He woke up at 6 making breakfast for his daughter Grace. He hugged her extra tight at school drop-off, then drove straight to the address from his interview email. He had ironed his clothes. The night before, a charcoal blazer worn over a dark shirt. Professional enough, without pretending to be a guy he simply wasn't. He polished his shoes, not because it would instantly win him the job. But his dad always said that how you handle the little things, the stuff nobody sees, shows your true character in everything else you do. He tucked the folder under his arm with total clarity. He felt calm. He knew he couldn't force a job offer, so he just planned to give it his absolute best. Stepping out of his car, he felt something surprising. An emotion he barely let himself experience anymore. Hope, but not reckless hope. Not that fragile kind of hope terrified of being let down again, just quiet. The grounded hope of a father, trusting that doing the right thing eventually speaks for itself. Harper Logistics took up the top 4 floors of a towering downtown glass building. A place that practically screamed ambition through its bold, modern design. The massive lobby felt very current. It had that sleek look of startups flush with serious design money. But it still managed to avoid feeling too snobby or pretentious. A warm receptionist sent Ryan up to the 11th floor. The elevator opened onto a sharp waiting area decorated in soft greens and grays. Sweeping city views surrounded the quiet hum of a business running on pure purpose. Ryan signed the guest book and sat down. He was 5 minutes early, the perfect margin for a serious candidate. Early enough to respect their time, but not desperate or overly anxious. He glanced at his prep notes without really reading the words. They were just a comfort blanket rather than actual new information. You and I know what's coming, as his attention drifted around the new room. Let's watch him absorb the lobby, the passing crowd, the steady corporate rhythm. He handled professional settings well, even if he looked slightly out of place. That came from the quiet confidence of a man who trusted his own abilities far more than the judgment of any room. Then, a familiar name across the waiting area caught his attention. Elegantly engraved on a silver plaque right beside some frosted glass doors. Evelyn Harper, Chief Executive Officer. He read it twice the way a person stares at an impossible coincidence, hoping the letters might scramble into a name he actually expected to see. They never changed. The letters stayed exactly as they were. Ryan sat there digesting this twist, feeling no panic, plotting no grand strategy. Just applying the same calm, neutral logic he used for any sudden surprise. He wondered what this meant. He wondered if his selfless act changed anything. He was still pondering that when those frosted glass doors finally opened. She breezed right through, clearly a boss juggling a dozen different problems at once. Leather folder tucked under her arm, casually wrapping up a chat with an assistant behind her. She wore a sharp dark suit, her hair pulled tightly back. Every single detail of her look, planned with the exact precision he noticed when rescuing her from that terrible date last night. She quickly turned toward the lobby, her eyes sweeping over Ryan with the practiced, assessing gaze of a leader used to reading people instantly, and then her eyes completely stopped. The silence dragged on for 4 seconds. Ryan counted them entirely by accident. He met her gaze with the exact same calm he showed during his good deed last night, neither proud nor sorry, simply present. He quietly watched the sequence of mental calculations flash across her face with incredible speed. Recognition, rapid processing, assessment, decision. She excelled at hiding her feelings, but Ryan was remarkably good at catching them. You can see it happen, that precise second when a corporate wall that has always been totally rigid suddenly feels the unexpected warmth of a past favor. Her composure held, but you could tell the dynamic had completely shifted forever. Her face shifted into the total neutrality of someone who had very deliberately chosen exactly how to play this out. She stepped up to him and offered her hand. Ryan Carter, she stated, her tone staying completely smooth and professional. Ryan stood firmly, shook her hand, and replied, "Yes, that is me." Neither of them breathed a single word about their actual history. That quiet act of kindness hung between them, a mutual respect needing zero confirmation. They shared a secret, and in that same split second, they had both chosen to strictly follow the professional rules of the boardroom they were currently standing in, rather than revisit Stormy Street from the night prior. She guided him into a sleek boardroom, where 2 executives were already waiting. Patricia Owens, a senior operations manager radiating 10 solid years of absolute authority, alongside David Sorrento from the company's own finance side. The CEO took her rightful place at the head and unzipped her leather folder. Let's watch her glance at his resume, and then place it gently face down. Then she studied Ryan with a direct, steady gaze. The calm focus of someone who knew true character always leaves a mark. And she simply said, "Let's start." Evelyn Harper skipped every single interview question Ryan had actually practiced for. She didn't ask about his tech certificates, his career history, or the specific software systems he had mastered. Even though all that background data sat on the resume she'd just flipped over. She folded her hands and asked, soft and completely straight to the point, "Tell me what you would do if you spotted a situation going completely wrong. But jumping in to help wasn't your job." Ryan didn't spit out an answer. He knew from years of hard electrical work that rushing a blind guess usually ended with a live wire and a bad burn. You and I know the quiet gap before an answer is where the real thinking happens. He weighed the question genuinely, ignoring whatever corporate test it was. Not chasing the perfect soundbite, but finding the raw truth he actually believed. Finally he said, "If I see a problem and I can help, then it instantly becomes my responsibility. A fancy job title doesn't change that." He stopped for just half a beat, then added, "If I ignore a bad situation just because it is not technically my problem, then I completely lose the right to complain when bad luck hits me, and nobody else steps forward to help." Evelyn kept her pen still. Patricia Owens jotted a tiny note and looked up. Beside them, David Sorrento slowly leaned back in his chair. The very next question asked about a time Ryan was forced into a tight spot, making a massive choice on the clock, missing half the facts. He responded by breaking down the timeline of one specific job. No big dramatic flair at all, just clean, precise, functional facts. He broke down the math with the calm rhythm of a candidate who truly survived the actual crisis, laying out exactly what he knew, his blind spots, his immediate priorities, and the final messy fallout. Looking back now, he never even claimed his call was perfect. He simply called it the smartest move possible with the broken tools at hand. Let's be real, that kind of quiet humility hit everyone in there. Evelyn kept digging like this. No basic theories, no boring corporate textbook fluff. No clean-cut fantasies, just heavy questions chasing the gritty reality of actual human experience on the ground. Pushing to see how he actually handled the raw, unpredictable chaos of a real site. Ryan faced down every single one with that exact same grounded truth. Just the blunt honesty of a man refusing to play pretend today. He flat out refused to drop heavy corporate jargon just to sound impressive to the hiring panel. He gave full credit to his crew for the group wins they shared. He didn't minimize his mistakes and never puffed up his own successes. He stayed totally, stubbornly real. And raw truth in an interview setting is rarer than any Ivy League credential. At one point, Patricia Owens grilled him on leading a team against the clock with a totally flaky vendor. Ryan mapped out his final fix, but boldly admitted where he massively messed up right at the start. A bad signal cross with a subcontractor that burned 2 entire days. And exactly how he rebuilt his whole approach to fix that specific failure. Owens took a note and almost smiled. Kindness always leaves its mark at the right time. David Sorrento paused until Owens finished and then asked. His voice sounded totally neutral, but it felt like a trap disguised as a question. He asked if Ryan felt worried about taking this corporate role, where he would be managing staff with far more formal schooling than he actually had. Ryan just looked right back at him, face completely calm. He calmly replied that what truly mattered was if he had the real-world experience and good judgment to actually do the job right. And on both those fronts, his track record proudly spoke for itself. He spoke without any anger, without any apologies. You and I know that quiet confidence. It belongs to a man who helps a stranger, asking for absolutely nothing. Sorrento stared him down for a tense second, then finally looked back at his notes. Throughout this entire hiring process, Evelyn Harper kept her eyes right on Ryan, watching with a sharp focus that missed absolutely nothing. She refused to make any final choices until all the facts were in. But she knew the secret complication. She was judging a job candidate who once stepped in to save her during a terrible date, far from any professional setting. She worried that feeling too grateful, or fighting too hard against that very gratitude, might ruin her ability to make a completely fair choice for herself and the company. But kindness has its own timing. For now, she pushed memories aside, focusing entirely on the applicant in front of her. She handed him a tough scenario, based on a real messy business problem her company actually dealt with last year. A true crisis with strict limits, forcing a very hard choice between moving fast or staying stable. She listened to him solve it out loud, tracking his sharp logic from start to finish. And when he landed on the exact brilliant answer she hoped for, not the basic one she expected, but the much better choice, she kept her face totally blank, hiding her silent approval. She wrapped the job interview, mentioning they still had plenty of other applicants to see, and promised to give him an answer within 7 days. Ryan simply nodded, grabbed his resume folder, and shook their hands. And he left with the exact same quiet grace he brought in with him. The door clicked shut. Patricia looked right at Evelyn and said, "He's good." You and I know exactly why Evelyn stayed completely silent, staring at that closed door. The board meeting that afternoon was rough. Let's look at Gerald Marsh together. He was a board member long before Evelyn took the company public. He reviewed the hiring pool with that specific arrogance belonging to powerful men who loved pulling strings behind the scenes without ever looking in control. Before Evelyn even finished reading her morning notes, Marsh had already locked in a very loud, stubborn choice. To Marsh, the only acceptable job candidate was a guy named Bradford Wells, an MBA from a fancy business school Marsh loved bragging about. A previous job at a major company the executive board recognized and respected, and a polished resume built to easily glide through any corporate hiring system. The exact piece of paper that brought deep comfort to executives who only judged real, living people by reading fancy summaries about them. Marsh pushed his argument, speaking with the slow arrogance of a man used to winning. And two other corporate board members listening on that call nodded along blindly, exactly like people who only survived by kissing up to the loudest authority in the room. Evelyn silently listened. You and I know patience pays off. Managing this board for years taught her that deep listening was both respectful and highly tactical. She knew people who rushed to interrupt usually surrendered information far too early. Meanwhile, those who simply listened gained sharp clarity, uncovering where the real weaknesses lay. She let Marsh finish speaking, then asked highly specific questions about Wells's operational background. And as the pressure of those targeted questions slowly mounted, his real experience proved much weaker than the resume claimed. She quietly noted the flaw without dwelling. Then she promised to finish her evaluation and reach out with the final hiring recommendation by Friday. When the call finally disconnected, she sat silently at her desk for a while. Her own judgment wasn't clouded or confused at all. Making countless high-pressure choices had taught her to fully trust her gut when her mind was firing correctly. What she was truly wrestling with was that familiar and heavy burden of defending a bold decision against the exact people whose crucial support she desperately needed, and the lingering question of whether this choice she felt was proper could truly justify such a massive personal cost. Her thoughts drifted to the previous evening. She hadn't intentionally tried blocking the memory, but sitting in the quiet afternoon glow of her office, she finally let herself reflect on that grace directly. She remembered the absolute precision of Ryan's sudden, kind intervention. Never dramatic, never performative, just genuinely kind. She pictured that rain-soaked sidewalk outside the bar and the honest conversation they shared right under the awning. The way his simple kindness gave her space to breathe, without ever making her feel like needing a quiet moment was something requiring explanation. She realized with uncomfortable clarity just how deeply relevant his selfless act truly was, connecting directly to the exact battle she had fought with the board for months. Their stubborn expectation that true credibility purely depended on polished presentation, that trust could be graded on paper, or that real value only existed in safe, recognizable corporate forms. She had argued fiercely, sitting through meeting after meeting, that their growing company desperately needed individuals who could genuinely execute the required work, instead of smooth talkers who simply described themselves as the perfect fit for the job. You see, during his interview that morning, Ryan Carter completely embodied exactly what she had meant. He was simply himself, offering no performance and expecting zero reward. By doing that, he proved far more convincing than a perfectly polished stack of credentials. Sure, Bradford Wells would probably perform decently enough in the role, but Evelyn knew Ryan Carter would be exceptional. Not because he managed to impress her through standard, conventional methods. It was because every answer he gave highlighted the exact same authentic, generous character, a rare quality this growing business desperately needed to find at the perfect time. Picking up her favorite pen, she wrote both candidates' names on a blank page and just sat there. Then she firmly crossed one out. Evelyn dialed Patricia Owens first. Owens was driving home, and a steady hum of road noise buzzed clearly in the background. Yet Owens answered with complete focus, something she consistently offered no matter the late hour. Evelyn plainly revealed her final choice. Owens stayed entirely silent for a moment, then finally replied, "I think that's right." She mentioned she'd spent the drive reviewing her own interview notes from earlier. And the more she read, his kindness left its mark. Let's look at this together. The gap between Carter and the others only widened. Not on a resume, but in that selfless character they truly needed for the role. After hanging up, Evelyn spent 20 minutes typing out the exact justification the board required. Not a defensive plea, that would be entirely the wrong angle. Instead, she drafted a clear breakdown of the role's daily demands. She tracked exactly how each person's interview answers either hit the mark or missed it completely. When she finally finished, the final document made her choice look absolutely impossible to argue with. Evelyn always wrote like that when she knew in her bones she was right. Her phone call to Gerald Marsh was brief. She laid out the facts cleanly, letting pure logic do all the heavy lifting. He brought up 2 objections. She saw both coming. She handled them calmly, never raising her voice or backing down. He promised to review the file and get back to her. She thanked him and hung up. Would the board accept the choice or fight it? She honestly did not know yet. That was one variable completely out of her hands. But she controlled the decision itself, and on that her mind was completely made up. The next morning, Ryan finally got the call. Sitting in the school parking lot, he had just watched his young daughter vanish through the front doors, walking with that special confident step she always had. Like wherever she headed was exactly the place she was meant to end up. His phone lit up with a number he knew belonged to the corporate office. He answered with the steady calm he had been carrying all week long. The quiet peace of a man who gave freely and accepted whatever fate handed back. The human resources rep sounded warm and professional. More importantly, the job offer was real. A solid title, a salary that completely changed the reality he had been living. Full health insurance for him and Grace. It was the exact kind of solid ground he viewed as the ultimate goal for 3 long years, never truly believing he would reach it. After hanging up, he sat in the silent parking lot for a minute, his hands gripping the steering wheel. You and I know the city kept moving, completely blind to how kindness just rewarded one single father inside a parked car. He refused to obsess over who made the choice or what swayed their minds. That was a mental wall he built the second he walked out of that interview. The evaluation was over. He had simply told the honest truth the whole time. The final outcome belonged to the universe. He figured the job offer had 0 to do with that bar. He wasn't entirely sure of that, but he chose to believe it. Believing that mattered. It traced back to that exact same decent, protective instinct that had made him step in and help a stranger last Thursday night. Ryan's opening day at Harper Logistics felt like any other awkward first day anywhere. A stiff ID badge, a desk that lacked the messy comfort of true ownership yet. Endless introductions, demanding he memorize far more new names than any human brain could handle. He navigated it with the same quiet strength he applied to his entire life. Asking solid questions, never expecting an immediate reward. He was already diving into the specific details, learning how this company's daily operations had naturally evolved. Patricia Owens met with him for an hour that afternoon. She walked away from their conversation completely satisfied. Her good judgment had just been fully validated. On his 3rd day, he spotted Evelyn Harper in the 11th floor hallway, walking right toward him. Their brief passing felt like a completely normal, everyday kind of moment. The CEO and a new hire sharing a simple professional nod. She said good morning using his first name. He politely replied using her formal title. Then they both kept walking their separate ways. From the outside, it looked like nothing, but both of them fully understood. In that short moment, they shared a secret history the hallway couldn't see. True character doesn't demand applause. They knew what keeping it professional really meant. Let's pause here. The conversation that really mattered happened during his 2nd week. Late in the evening. The office was deserted, and Ryan was still at his desk, carefully looking over blueprints for a major distribution center that was already 3 months behind schedule. He heard footsteps. Evelyn Harper stood in the doorway, wearing the expression of someone who finally decided to do the exact thing her strict self-control had been delaying. She walked in and sat across from him. It was the posture of someone needing to say something important, wanting to say it straight out. Ryan slowly lowered his pen. She said, "I need to ask you something and I want total honesty." He calmly replied that honesty was the only way he ever operated. She asked, "If you had known exactly who I was that night, what my company was, that I would be interviewing you the very next morning, what would you have done?" She asked with the careful restraint of someone who had chewed on this for 2 weeks. She braced for honesty, though maybe not the kind she hoped for. Ryan sat quietly for a second. He weighed her question with the heavy respect it deserved. Then he just said the same thing. No extra details, no soft padding or defensive words that might make his true, unselfish motives easier to doubt. Just those simple words, anchored by the undeniable weight of a genuinely good man. Evelyn Harper stared at him for a long, quiet minute, then she whispered, "I know." Her gentle tone made it clear she had known the truth for 2 weeks. His response wasn't a shock to her, but hearing him say it out loud proved the quiet hope she had been holding on to inside. She gave one gentle nod. She looked like someone who just realized good people still exist. His quiet kindness had shifted her entire worldview. She said goodnight and walked out. Ryan sat there in the silence for a bit. Just him, those complex blueprints, and the heavy stillness of the completely empty office. He didn't ask for a reward, he just picked up his pen and worked. We both know some stories end cleanly. They finish with a grand gesture, a huge celebration, or a loud moment shutting like a door, locking away all the messy history before it. But you and I know this isn't that story. Pure kindness plants a seed. For Ryan and Evelyn, the real reward just took time to slowly grow. You and I know that real connections build slowly, rooted in something much deeper than mere chance. They take root in the genuine character of two people across repeated, quiet encounters. These two would work side by side for months before the word friends actually fit what they had. And they remained friends for far longer. Long before anything deeper began to take shape. But right from day one, you could easily see how rock solid their foundation was. Ryan Carter had rescued a complete stranger without knowing a thing about her. No hidden motives, no waiting around for a safety net of expected gratitude. He acted simply because he had a little girl sleeping safely back at home. Because this single father wanted to live by example. The alternative, just walking right past. Ignoring her trouble, shielding himself from the world, he just was not wired that way. That was the absolute whole truth. And in the grand scheme of things, the only story that mattered. Evelyn Harper made a tough career call while facing down massive pressure from management. Guided purely by evidence and judgment. Free from emotional bias and free from any rigid overcompensation against it. She chose a candidate because the facts backed him up, and her finely tuned instincts confirmed the data. Those two separate elements, combined together, sparked every single thing that followed. Genuine kindness is never a strategy. That is its defining magic, the trait making it deeply meaningful rather than merely tactical. Kindness offered just to secure a later payoff is a transaction. And calculated transactions are not kindness, however nicely they disguise themselves. Ryan wasn't playing chess when he stepped into that bar on a random Thursday. And the fact that his good karma circled back to provide real stability for his little girl, returning through someone who clearly saw his true colors, that was never a lesson about clever tactics. It was a beautifully quiet, totally unrepeatable demonstration, proving how human paths cross in a world where karma stays totally hidden until the exact right moment. The final image left behind is wonderfully simple. Picture a warm spring afternoon, several months removed from the exact moment this whole story kicked off. Ryan stands by the school gates, happily watching his little girl push through the sea of exiting kids with that specific, absolute full-body joy of a 6-year-old who just had an awesome day and finally spots her dad. Right across the street, stepping directly out of the car she has just pulled up in. Evelyn Harper catches the beautiful moment completely by accident. She watches the single dad and his kid, the little girl sprinting, the father kneeling to scoop her up. She watches just long enough to feel a profound warmth settle deep in her chest, an emotion she cannot quite put a name to yet. Then she softly turns and walks into the building, carrying that warmth quietly inside her. Exactly how the very best things are carried, entirely without words. No big announcements, just present, understood, and beautifully real.